I figure that there are two ways to go when you're preparing to speak on the weekend before the 4th of July. First of these is to figure that everybody else will cover the top 10 hits and get on with introducing another topic despite the hoopla. The second, the one that I chose, is to just lean into the curve, accept the unavoidable, and talk about freedom and America. To be honest, the first note that I made for myself when casting about for topics was freedom. Duh. That got me thinking about the country's founding fathers and all of the settlers who came here seeking opportunity and freedom of some type or other. Wouldn't that make an uplifting talk? Let's give everybody a breath of fresh air, some sunshine right up the old keister and send them home happy, right? If it was as simple as that, I'd have just gotten on with it. But my brain always has to make things complicated. Since I'm not really the type to go in for blind faith and jumping on bandwagons, except ironically actual bandwagons because heck yeah. I found myself asking awkward questions like, what were these mythological antecedents of ours really fighting for? That one in particular kind of stuck. It's easy to say that they fought for freedom, but like any buzzword, that's just there as something to say. I started listing things: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from monarchical oppression, but then it dawned on me that I was mostly listing things that had been a part of the Bill of Rights and an addendum imposed on those who wrote the Constitution, itself something that came about a few years after independence was already won. It still left me wondering what it was that they wanted to get from rebelling against the powers that be. When my answer dawned on me, I realized that I am one seriously cynical SOB. The revolutionary talking points were freedom from oppression and freedom from taxation without representation. They wanted power to decide their own laws and be self-governing. And they were tired of some all-powerful, faraway government taking all of their money without giving them a say in the matter. I boiled this down to two things: money and power. Once I'd done that, the founding fathers looked a lot more like the normal, everyday humans that I see walking around, and the whole enterprise made a lot more sense to me from a modern perspective. Some things never change. Even if these men were no longer mystical or larger than life, they still have my respect. Why? Because they seem to have some notion that even limited as they were by their own perspectives and goals, they were creating the framework for something greater. I find it unlikely that these men ever dreamed of the pluralistic society that they enabled. These white Christian men would likely be shocked at the nation that we have become, although I have a feeling that at least a few of them would be a little bit relieved. At the very least, these were men who were engaged and involved in the issues of the day and wanted to take action to remedy what they saw as the ills of their age. I know how much energy it takes to push through the everyday drain on time and effort that is simply living through the day. I can't imagine having enough energy to successfully foment a revolution on top of what I do every day. But that may be because I don't have scads of money, servants, slaves, and a subjugated wife doing everything else for me. Sorry, I got cynical again there for a moment. Back to what I was saying. Never once do I think that they considered it likely that women would vote one day and would inspire to more and eventually be granted the right to vote, to run for office, to lead soldiers in battle, and certainly not to rise to the vice presidency and preside over our nation's Senate. Despite their best intentions, we still appear to have done some things right. All of those things have happened, and we have hopes for far greater strides in equality for all. That, of course, is just the tip of the iceberg of things that the founders could never have envisioned. Somehow, they successfully laid the framework for a nation that could evolve over time as new generations sought a better life for themselves and their families. After the initial shock, I think that they might be very proud of the work, that their work stands, and that the foundation that they have laid has allowed for a grand, relatively unified country to arise in which people might expect to have their freedoms respected and to have the ability to continue to fight for equality and freedom from oppression. But I'm left wondering if they would also see that the seeds of our downfall have sprouted, and that the insidious drive for money and power have entwined themselves around our people and are choking us and trying to take away the power that we took for ourselves so long ago. After all, these were men who created a pressure relief valve for society. They recognize that people who are left without recourse to alter the social contract and the rules of their government would do exactly what they did: revolt in search of something better. This brings me back to money and power. Isn't that the American dream, though? When it comes down to it, isn't that what we seek? Isn't that why we devalue professions which confer neither of these? Isn't that why we pay billions every year for our college degrees, while at the same time disparaging those who taught us? Welcome to America. If you don't have money, if you can't empower us, if you don't play a sport at a world-class level or sing famous songs, if you don't fall into a comfortable, well-established niche, we're not likely to grant you the same freedoms that we expect, the same right to respect and equitable treatment that we would otherwise demand for ourselves. Look out, there's a loosely relevant tangential soapbox coming up. Just a heads up. If you're lucky, there's some subset of America that hates you outright in some easily televised way, because even at our worst, we still quail at having our own prejudices and misanthropy broadcast for the world to see. And so, like a flash, you're on the fast track to acceptance because we find shame in being confronted with our own actions and prejudices. But God help you if the oppression that you feel is okay because that's the way it is. God help you if your skin is brown, or if you're poor, sick, discouraged, or in any way different, because then most of society will turn a blind eye to your disadvantages, your over-policing, your virtual serfdom at the hands of our modern feudal lords, making their millions and billions and paying pennies to those whose blood, sweat, tears, and mental well-being are quite literally sacrificed for the good of the few. After all, that's just the way it is, isn't it? You're just at the bottom, and you need to work hard and suffer so that you can join those who have achieved the American dream of money and power. We're also busy looking up with envy. We don't bother to look down or look around to see that we're back to where we were hundreds of years ago. So what's my point? What do I want you to take from this that's relevant to our upcoming holiday? I want you, while you're lighting fireworks, waving flags, watching parades, and generally reveling in our freedom, to occasionally stop and give a thought to why you are celebrating. Are you rejoicing because you have money and power? Are you celebrating your personal freedom from oppression? Is that why you're suddenly engaging with townsfolk that you normally don't see as anything other than a hindrance to you on the road or the store? I think that's far more likely that you're celebrating a temporary lifting from your shoulders of the yoke that has become so commonplace, so normal that you hardly feel it anymore. And that's if you're one of the fortunate enough to work a job that allows you the day off. For those of you who find yourselves toiling through our national holiday, seriously, what are you celebrating? Has the American dream come true for you? I doubt it. Over the past 30 to 40 years, Americans have found themselves locked into greater and greater poverty. At best, we are indentured servants striving to pay off student loans, mortgages, medical debt, or the debt that amasses simply by trying to survive in a society where your paltry hourly wage is worth less and less every day, and where the climate changes and we trudge down a path of self-destruction out of sheer exhaustion. Open your eyes and take a good look at the modern nobility, consolidating their hold over you and over your children and grandchildren. And understand that through complacency, we have allowed ourselves to fall once again into the hands of a far-off tyranny, not removed by distance, but by socioeconomic status. Our power has gone more and more to those who can afford to purchase votes at the federal, state, and local levels. And this movement, this effort to limit freedoms and control what actions we may take to only those acceptable to the most conservative, the most reactionary amongst us, is finally coming out of the shadows. State legislatures, city governments, and local elected officials put in place by a grassroots movement 40 years old are looking around and seeing that they have the ability to overtly seize control now. And yet, God help me, I have some hope. Enshrined in the documents which created our nation still exists our right to protest, to take personal and unified action, and to throw off our oppressors. Until it is ripped out of those documents, we still have a measure of power. What can you do? How can you help? How can you fight back using the very rights and ideals of those that would take your freedom that they say they uphold as inviolable? Do what our forebears did. Get engaged in the fight. Back in April of this year, we had an election. Did you notice? Down in Yorkville, we were selecting some of the most important posts in all of our civic structure: school board members. These people have a controlling say in what is or is not taught in our schools. And in case you've never thought of it this way, our schools are where we indoctrinate our youth to our way of life, and most importantly, our way of thinking. Take it from a former teacher. Just under 16% of registered voters turned out for this undersung election. I almost didn't turn out. My wife and I were researching candidates on the day of the election, and as usual, not finding as much information as we really needed. What we did find were a few reasonable men and women amidst a group of reactionary, right-wing white nationalists. Not the kind of people who usually wind up on school boards, right? Not the kind of people that we would normally vote for. I am confident that most of the voters out by me wouldn't vote for people like that. But most of the voters didn't turn out that day. Most of the voters probably just had to work and hadn't realized that we had a chance to vote for anything that day anyway. Most voters likely didn't know or didn't care that they had a chance to use their voice, or for that matter, how important it might have been for them to do so. It takes someone passionate about social change to vote in an election like that. Someone who's engaged in the fight. Guess who won? Guess who now gets power over what is going to be taught to my children and all of their friends? Guess who gets to mold the next generation of voters for a little while? Guess which movement just got a big vote of public support? Not mine. You've really got to care to turn out for the small elections. You've got to have a reliable source of information about the candidates. Take time to research them, figure out who to vote for, and then get to it despite having to work that day, or whatever other necessities of life are in the way. You've got to want to do it. You've got to understand how important it is if you're going to push yourself to get it done. For some perspective, Geneva saw a similarly dismal turnout with less than 20% of registered voters weighing in. St. Charles numbers made us all look good, with, in some contests, less than 10% turnout. Batavia made us all look bad, though. They averaged 35 to 40% of registered voters. For the record, the village of Wayne saw the best turnout in Kane County, with just under 50% of their 669 voters turning up. The next time that you think your vote doesn't count, maybe remember that only a few hundred people actually voted in some of these local elections, and occasionally less than 100 showed up. Your vote absolutely does count. In fact, it's critical. Get engaged, get involved, get informed, and spread the word. For too long have we treated our right to vote as an annoyance to be dealt with once every 4 years. Get over that. Get past that. Use the enduring gift from our founding fathers as the powerful tool that it is, or be prepared to lose it, to lose your freedom from the ground up. Generation after generation lost to our political apathy. Please, for the future of us all, go get your hands dirty and protect our rights and our liberty. Run for office. Spread information. Make it a law that election days are holidays. Whatever you do, vote like our lives depend on it. Thank you.
Visit us at uusg.org.